I couldn't stay quiet presently, Daphne rumored, her voice pulsing. You merited to know, Will. You merited to know everything. Will stopped pacing. Sluggishly, designedly, he turned to face Ivy. His eyes burned with unbelief and fury. Is it true? He demanded, his voice low but deadly. Everything she just told me, is it true? Ivy swallowed hard. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The letter quivered in her hand, as if it had a life of its own, hanging to expose her at any moment. For weeks that letter had been her power, her armament, her protection. Now it was about to come her downfall. Answer me. Will snapped, stepping near. Yes, Ivy eventually breathed. But you don't understand. Understand. Will let out a harsh, earnest laugh. You forged letters. You manipulated everyone. You destroyed lives. And now you want me to understand? Daphne rose to her bases, gashes streaming down her cheeks. She interdicted the real letter, Will. The one your mama wrote before she failed. Ivy changed it. She made it feel like your mama had disowned you. The words hit him like a physical blow. Will staggered back a step, pain slicing through his casket. His mama's final words had visited him for times. The cold rejection, the heartache, the unanswered questions, all of it had shaped who he came. And now he was learning it had all been a taradiddle. You took that from me, he rumored, his voice cracking. You took my mama's last words down. Ivy shook her head frenetically. I was spooked. I allowed. If you knew the verity, you'd leave. I loved you, Will. I couldn't lose you. Love. Daphne cried plaintively. That's not love. That's preoccupation. Will stepped near to Ivy. His eyes locked onto the letter in her hand. Give me that letter. Ivy artificially pulled back. No. His voice rose, sharp and commanding. I said give it to me. She dithered, fear flashing across her face. That letter was her final guard. The last fragile hedge between her and complete destruction. Without it she had nothing. No influence. No falsehoods left to tell. I can explain, she contended. Please just hear. Will dived forward, grabbing her wrist. Give me that letter. Ivy plodded, trying to pull down, but his grip was firm. The paper crumpled slightly between their hands as they dragged back and forth. The air crepitated with raw emotion. Grief, rage, treason, until suddenly Ivy yanked her arm free and slighted him. The room fell into stupefied silence. Will goggled at her, shock firmed across his face. For a split second, the world sounded to stop spinning. Also, commodity inside him snapped. Without thinking, driven by pure instinct and heartache, Will raised his hand and struck her. The sound echoed through the room, sharp, brutal, final. Ivy staggered backward, clinging her impertinence. Gashes swamped her eyes, shock and desolation mixing with shame. The letter slipped from her fritters and fluttered to the bottom like a wounded raspberry. Daphne heaved, covering her mouth. Oh my God. Will stood there, his casket heaving, horror settling over his features as reality crashed down on him. He'd no way hit anyone before. No way. And yet, in that moment, it had felt ineluctable. The explosion of months of falsehoods and pain erupting all at formerly. His voice broke. I didn't mean. But Ivy wasn't hearkening. She sank onto the settee, blubbing. Uncontrollably. Her entire world collapsing around her. The life she had precisely erected through deception was worsening, and she had no bone left to condemn but herself. Daphne sluggishly crossed the room and picked up the fallen letter. Her fritters quivered as she unfolded it. She read the delicate handwriting, gashes blurring the words. Oh, Will, she rumored. She loved you so much. Your mama no way stopped believing in you. Not for a alternate. Will closed his eyes, a choked sound escaping his throat. The grief he'd buried for so long came rushing back, overwhelming him. All those times of tone mistrustfulness, of feeling unwanted and unloved, they had been erected on a taradiddle. I lost her doubly, he muttered. Formerly when she failed. And again when Ivy stole this from me. Daphne handed him the letter. He took it gently, as though it might disintegrate in his hands. Sluggishly, he lowered himself into a president and began to read. Every word felt like a cutter and a adder at the same time, slicing open old injuries while soothing them with verity. Across the room, Ivy watched him, her heart shattering with every gash that slipped down his face. She had told herself that everything she did was for love. But now, gaping at the desolation she had caused, she realized how crooked her interpretation of love had come. "I no way wanted to hurt you," she rumored. "I just wanted you to stay. Well, hadn't meant to look around." He told himself that lie as he stood outside the door to the executive design studio. He was only there to drop off a portfolio. But voices came through the partly open door, low and close, charged with something that was clear. His hand stopped moving on the folder. He knew those voices right away. R.J. Forrester. Forrester Electra. His heart skipped a beat, and disbelief filled his chest before anger could catch up. Electra stood close to R.J. inside, her fingers lightly gripping the lapel of his jacket, as if letting go would make the world tilt off its axis. R.J.'s voice changed from confident to something raw and reckless. He talked about stress, expectations, and living in the shadow of great people. Electra listened, her eyes shining with understanding and something more dangerous. It happened quickly and slowly at the same time when R.J. leaned in. At first, their lips touched hesitantly, then they kissed for sure. A kiss that came from more than just attraction. It came from being alone together. Will took a sharp breath. The folder slipped a little bit in his hand. His mind raced, going over things that now made no sense at all. Electra's evasive glances, R.J.'s sudden protectiveness, and the way conversations stopped when Will walked into a room. As he moved, the door creaked, and the kiss inside stopped right away. Electra turned around, her eyes wide and her face pale. R.J. stepped back, and every line of his body showed how guilty he felt. "Will," Electra whispered, as if saying his name softly would make him forget what he had seen. Will didn't yell. He didn't come in like a storm. That almost made things worse. He just stared at them, his anger turning into something colder and more permanent. "How long? How long?" he asked softly. The silence that came after was enough of an answer. Daphne Rose sat on the edge of a velvet sofa in a stylish but dark apartment across town that looked out over the city. Her hands were clenched in her lap. Ivy Forrester walked around her slowly, as if she were a strategist looking at the last move of a game that had already been won. Ivy's smile was calm, practiced, and scary because it was so sure of itself. She held a tablet and lazily scrolled through texts, photos, and recorded conversations that Daphne had no idea existed. They were all wildly out of context but still very upsetting. Ivy said smoothly, stopping just behind Daphne, "You see, this isn't personal. It gives you power." Daphne took a deep breath. She had trusted Ivy with her fears, insecurities, and complicated relationships with the Forrester world. Those confessions were now weapons. Ivy bent down and spoke in a low voice that promised punishment. "You will do exactly what I say. You will say what I tell you to say. And in return your life stays the same." Daphne's face showed fear for a moment, but then she became determined. "What do you want?" she asked, but she already knew the answer wouldn't be easy. Will finally walked all the way into the room at Forrester Creations. The door clicked shut behind him with a loud bang. R.J. opened his mouth to say something, but Will raised his hand and stopped him. He said, "Don't. Just don't." His eyes were fixed on Electra, and pain flashed through his calm exterior. "You could have told me." Electra's voice shook. "I didn't mean to do this. It just happened." Will shot back. "That's the problem. Things always just happen, and I'm the last to know." He turned away, clenched his jaw, and fought the urge to break something or someone. "We're not done. But we're not okay either." He left before either of them could say anything, and the sound of his footsteps echoed like a warning shot. R.J. leaned against the desk and ran a hand through his hair. He said, "We just blew everything up." Electra looked at the closed door, tears welling up but not falling. She knew that Will wasn't just hurt, he was also embarrassed. And in their world, being embarrassed could lead to revenge. Will stood alone on the Spencer Terrace that night, with city lights stretching out in front of him. He had missed calls from RJ and unanswered texts from Electra on his phone. He didn't pay any attention to them. He was already changing his mind, going from sadness to planning. He learned one thing while growing up around media moguls and powerful people. Information was money, and secrets always came with a price. Ivy poured herself a glass of wine and felt good as Daphne left the apartment with her shoulders stiff and her eyes downcast. Ivy silently raised her glass in a toast to getting control back. People don't give fear enough credit, she said to herself. That's when it works best. The next morning at Forrester, the air was thick with tension, like the humidity before a storm. People whispered behind Electra as she walked down the hall. She felt vulnerable because she was sure Will had already told someone. RJ tried to get her attention during a meeting, but she couldn't look at him because Will was sitting across the table, his face unreadable and his silence louder than any accusation. Daphne sat in Ivy's office later that day and repeated lines that Ivy had carefully written. As Daphne told half-truths meant to throw off suspicion and stir doubt, Hope Logan's face grew tense with confusion. She felt like she was betraying herself with every word, but Ivy's threat was always on her mind. She hated how weak she felt and how good Ivy was at taking advantage of it. By the end of the week, the alliances had changed. Will publicly distanced himself from Electra, which led to rumors. RJ worked hard to prove his worth, even though guilt was eating away at him. Ivy's power spread quietly, and her fingerprints were everywhere but not visible. Daphne also started to see that obeying Ivy would only make her hold on tighter. At a charity gala where designer gowns and carefully staged smiles were everywhere, things finally broke down. Will faced Electra under a crystal chandelier. His voice was low but deadly. He said, "I need to know. Did you ever plan to tell me?" Electra looked him in the eye, and her heart broke. "Yes," she said. "But I was scared. And now I've lost you anyway." Ivy, who was nearby, watched Daphne from across the room, not knowing that Daphne had already made up her mind. She was afraid to speak, but anger was louder. She realized that anger could be just as strong as leverage. She sat beside him. "You're someone who survived treason. Someone who chose verity over comfort. Someone stronger than you suppose." Will looked at her, his eyes softening. "You stood by me when everything collapsed." "I always will," Daphne said. Their eyes locked, emotion thick between them. But neither moved closer. Too important had happened. Too important pain still lingered. Ivy's downcast curl continued. Late one night, she returned to the empty manse, collapsing onto the staircase in despair. Her phone buzzed again. "Ready to pay for your sins yet?" "Who are you?" she rumored audibly. A moment laterly a print appeared. It was of her forging the letter. Her breath hitched. That footage had been cancelled, or so she believed. Another communication arrived. "I enjoy everything you tried to hide. And now I enjoy you." Fear swamped her modes. Someone had orchestrated this downfall with perfection. Someone case. Someone ruthless. And suddenly Ivy understood. This wasn't just vengeance. This was war. Days laterally, Will entered a process. Ivy was being formally charged. Daphne watched him read the document, concern shadowing her eyes. "Are you going to swear?" He dithered. "I do and no," he admitted. "Part of me wants justice. Part of me just wants this agony to end." Daphne squeezed his hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you." Will jounced sluggishly, but his studies were away. Despite everything Ivy had done, he couldn't forget the girl he'd formerly loved, the woman who had held him when his world was falling piecemeal, indeed if her comfort was erected on falsehoods. But remission didn't mean forgetting. And love didn't abolish treason. Meanwhile, Ivy sat alone in her dark apartment, gaping at her reflection in the window. The megacity lights blurred through unshed gashes. "I earned this," she rumored. "But I wouldn't go down without a fight." For the first time, her despair hardened into resoluteness. Whoever was targeting her had undervalued one thing. Ivy didn't surrender. She survived. She acclimated. And if she had to burn everything down to cover herself, she would.